Good morning. Welcome again to Morning Devotions, and thank you again so much for our time together. We're starting revival nights out at East that got postponed due to all the Habagat floods and everything. We look forward to seeing you tonight. I want to talk to you today about what does it look like when a leader stands up and tries to go against the flow, tries to go against culture rather than engage the culture, tries to stand up and teach people, let's engage with God. King Hezekiah wanted to serve God and wanted to bring the people back to God. In our reading today, starting in 2 Chronicles, he sends a letter out, beginning in verse 6, to be read in all the villages all across Israel. And as the runners take the letter out, it says in verse 10, but most of the people just laughed at the runners and made fun of them. This is what you often see, even among the people of God, when leaders are calling the people to serve God and calling the people back to revival. God's people laugh at you. Secondly, you see priests, spiritual leaders, shamed into doing what was right as the move of God begins to pick up steam. It says on the 14th day of the second month, 1 month later than usual, the people slaughtered the Passover lamb. This shamed the priests and Levites, so they purified themselves and brought burnt offerings to the temple of the Lord. Now, how do you shame spiritual leaders? You shame them by doing their jobs, by doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then they begin to be convicted and shamed into doing what is right. And you often see this as a move of God begins to move forward, leaders shamed into doing the right things. And then you see people doing the right thing, but doing it in the wrong way. Beginning in verse 18, you've got the people from Ephraim and Manasseh, Issachar and Zebulun, who partook of the Passover lamb without purifying themselves. And Hezekiah had to pray to them and say, may the Lord who is good pardon those who decide to follow the Lord, the God of their ancestors, even if they're not properly cleansed for the ceremony. And the Lord listened to Hezekiah's prayer and healed the people. God is not a mean, angry God. As people try to reach out and do what's right, even if they're trying, but they're not doing it quite right, God's just happy people are trying to do things. And then you get over here into chapter 31 and you see the people begin to tithe again. They brought a large quantity, a tithe of all they produced, beginning in verse 5. And you see a snowball begin. But it starts when a leader stands up and says, folks, we will serve the Lord. We will do anything. We will stand up and we will do what is right, even if everybody laughs at us, even if everybody mocks us. This is what it begins to look like. Now, we are living in days just prior to the next great move of God, if Jesus tarries. And, the only time I saw days like this spiritually, I was kind of too young to understand it. But I look back at the sermons I used to preach in the late 70s and early 80s as a young preacher traveling. I used to preach sermons on casual Christianity. Where did commitment go? Bearing fruit, not gathering fruit. It seems all of life seems to go in cycles. Revival and God blesses, and then the people forget God in the time of blessing and prosperity, and difficult times come. But God is faithful and He will revive us again. But as you begin to see some of these things happening, leaders who go against the culture rather than engage the culture, and people begin to mock them because they say we should return to the paths of serving God and doing the right things. People of God getting excited and doing the things that preachers who have grown cold in their hearts have stopped doing, and preachers beginning to feel ashamed of themselves and starting to do the right things again. People trying to do what's right, but I'm kind of messing up a little bit, and God comes along and forgives them and helps them learn to do the right thing in the right way. And the people of God returning to tithing, because that's where the principle all starts in Genesis. The symbol of our submission to God's authority in our life is the tithe. The tithe is not to be used to build buildings and enrich preachers. The tithe is to be used to make sure that there's plenty of spiritual leadership, and that's what it was used for. That the spiritual leaders could again be, quote, so they could devote themselves fully to the law of God, chapter 31, verse 4. We are in these days where we are beginning to see these things.